On August 6th, 2021, Twitter user @BasementMonkey, or Noel, posted a series of 16 tweets over the course of the afternoon. They were for a mental health awareness thread, where she describes different mental illnesses and disorders, along with providing some symptoms and diagnostic criteria, under the reasoning that they are a mental health advocate who wants to make sure that everyone is heard. But here's the thing, this thread is absolutely not great, and I'll explain why soon enough, but besides the thread itself, what really intrigued me were the reactions that people had to it. And looking at those, I realized that I could use this thread as the foundation for a conversation that I've wanted to have with a camera for a long time now, a discussion on teenagers like me, and how the various mental issues they/we have warp our relationship with the internet, and how the internet warps our perception of those issues. I realize that lots of what I'll say may be somewhat indecipherable to anyone who hasn't fallen into as deep as a hole as I have, but I hope this is enjoyable regardless. And on that note, let's begin. How else could I begin if not by simply reading out the thread? Now, I will admit, I honestly think that reading the entire 1,000-word long thread would get a bit long and boring, so instead I will be showing you specifically the 5 tweets in the thread with over 1,000 quote retweets, because as you'll know if you've spent any time on Twitter, there's a direct correlation between how many times a tweet of yours has been quote retweeted and how bad your opinions are. So hopefully that will provide a decent picture of the thread, but if you are looking to read the entire thing, it will be linked in the description, because as of now it's still up, and just in case I also archived it on the Wayback Machine, because I am an incredibly paranoid person. Anyways.
ADHD is when you can't sit still or you get distracted a lot. Sometimes you experience hyperfixations, which mean you're interested in something. Some diagnostic criteria include getting distracted a lot, not liking school and getting bad grades, and running around and liking to jump.
Autism is kind of like Down syndrome, but you do not have an extra chromosome. It's just a mental illness. Some diagnostic criteria include being the weird kid at school, having an interest in one thing, and being awkward.
Borderline personality disorder is where you feel every emotion at once all the time, and sometimes you can't find it. Some diagnostic criteria include dyeing your hair a lot, having a lot of emotion, and biting people too fast.
Depression is a severe mental illness that's diagnosed based on extreme sadness and not wanting to go outside or to the bank anymore. Some of the diagnostic criteria include having not showered in a week, feeling sad, and not liking to do things like going outside.
Anxiety is a disorder that means everything makes you scared and nervous. I have anxiety, so I know the struggles. Some of the diagnostic criteria include being the lord of phobias, stuttering when ordering food, and getting stage fright easily.
Some other highlights of the thread include having a pencil holder being listed as an OCD symptom, the implications that cosplaying on TikTok means that you have DID, or that thinking you're hot makes you a narcissist, or the use of t-shirts to explain PTSD, and the cover image of the thread itself, a frame from the 1950 film Broken Arrow about the growing conflict between white settlers and an Apache tribe. There's probably something to read into there, but I don't feel qualified to elaborate on that, which means that I won't. If you haven't been able to guess already, the thread is somewhat of a dumpster fire, with blatantly incorrect definitions of disorders that range from so bad it's funny to genuinely harmful, and people on Twitter reacted how you would expect them to. Hundreds of people had at least one disorder mentioned in the thread, so they all flocked to their respective tweet and responded to it somehow, mostly either by correcting Noelle in some aspect, making fun of her, or disgracing them, because how dare she perpetuate all of these harmful stereotypes? Disorders like the ones they mentioned are complex, genuine descriptions for assorted issues that people have to cope and live with on a daily basis, and these labels cannot just be applied to you from 3 bullet points, and it's awful that they're implying the opposite. In short, this thread was absolutely not received well, except that was probably the point. Now, this thread does not exist in a vacuum, obviously, so let's take some time to talk about who tweeted it. But first, I feel as if I should quickly explain the concept of bait to anyone who's unfamiliar. In the context of the internet, bait is a specific genre of post usually used to incite anger in people, something with such a bad opinion that you can't help but reply to it and give the original poster attention, which is exactly what they want. Some people, especially those with a concerningly large amount of empty time on their hands, create bait accounts, forming an entire character to play online, someone who wholeheartedly believes these bad opinions and is also hell-bent on spreading them. You could also call these kinds of accounts trolls, but I would rather concuss myself than use that word genuinely. There are many things about Noelle that make it clear that she's not entirely a real person, which I'm sure you'll quickly pick up on, but I will be treating them like one, for the sake of making things easier to understand, and also just because it's funny. So let's lean into the nightmare here a little, and look at her Curd. And I'm saying that with two R's. If you haven't heard of it, Curd is a website making tool, which lots of people on social media use to create cute little introduction web pages to pin on their profiles for any potential new followers. Cards are also commonly used as a sort of digital pamphlet to explain and or spread information. Noelle's card is only 3 pages long, so this should be quick. Noelle, or Rachel Ruiz, or Guadalupe, is a 15-year-old Kansan who is a white, neurodivergent, brunette-sexual sophomore in high school. She uses she, they, and Jeremiah pronouns, and is an aspiring psychologist. They claim that she is already quite good at reading people. Although they don't have the resources to get professionally diagnosed, she has self-diagnosed herself with borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, obsessive-compulsive disorder, autism spectrum disorder, and schizoaffective disorder. Genshin Impact is her special interest, and they experience psychosis, which manifests itself in delusional attachments, specifically towards Noelle from Genshin Impact, Nagito Komaeda from Danganronpa, Nemo from Finding Nemo, Yumiko Jabami from Kakaguri, and Dangerous ASMR from the YouTube channel. They also dabble in kinning, highlights including Hello Kitty, Ash Ketchum, and lesbians. I'm just reading what I see. She is traumatized from their abusive ex always typing in capitals towards her, but doesn't seem to mind typing in all caps themselves. She also does not want to interact with those who don't think self-diagnosing is valid, or those who think you have to be an adult to have a personality disorder, nor anyone who doesn't respect and use their neopronouns, and especially not anyone who doesn't use tone indicators, or anyone who doesn't listen to dangerous ASMR's videos before bed. And don't even get her started on not liking Heads Up 7-Up. Their Twitter account says that she joined in July 2021, presumably late into the month, with their current first public tweet being a selfie posted on July 28th. One of her next tweets was explaining the previously mentioned brunette sexuality, a new sexuality they coined that's defined by attraction to adventurous personalities regardless of gender. And then after about a week, she began posting that fateful thread. And now, we're all caught up. Due to the sheer absurdity of Noelle and what surrounds her, it seems decently clear that she is bait of some sort. And if they're not, then I am so incredibly sorry, /Jen. But even if she isn't real, I still feel like that there's a lot to be discussed here. One of the more interesting qualities of bait is that it can't just be created out of nothing, at least not if you want to actually catch anyone. There has to be some sort of inspiration that is then elevated to a level that borders too absurd to be genuine, and possibly a real opinion that someone has. But if that's the case, then what was the inspiration here? What sort of environment spawned this?
Hello everyone. Remember to watch my video about some Twitter thread made by a person with less than 70 followers. Would you like to tweet this?
This may come as a bit of a shock, but a worldwide pandemic may have altered the way that we operate a little. And although many of the important day-to-day life changes are being studied to death by people who actually know what they're doing, I would like to chime in and document a development that I do feel qualified to talk about, mainly because it barely has any real significance. I would like to talk to you about how the way we use Twitter changed as we all stayed at home for a while. And I don't just mean that we used social media sites like Twitter to communicate with people who we couldn't converse with physically. That part's obvious. I'm specifically referring to the developments in how we share information in the 8th circle of hell. The idea of a Twitter thread has existed for as long as the reply button has. It's just the fancy term for a sequence of replies. If you just continuously reply to yourself, then you can communicate a message that's much longer than your initial 280 character limit. But be careful though. If your message becomes too unruly, then it might just be more convenient to use something like Twitlonger, and everyone knows that using Twitlonger to communicate is the equivalent of public humiliation as punishment for a crime. But anyway, in the age of a pandemic and coincidentally timed horrible political unrest, there became a need to communicate information in a way that was more concise and quick. If you wanted your words to be acknowledged, then they better drill themselves into the heads of your audience as fast as possible. So then the current iteration of a thread was born. Every time a development occurred, no matter in how big or small of a social circle, or whenever someone felt the need to educate a community on a subject, a Twitter user would take the time to summarize it all into a nice, easily retweetable package, with people only needing to share the first tweet of the thread to convince themselves that they've been enough of an activist for the day, leaving their followers to be the ones to decide if they actually wanted to continue reading and possibly share the information further. I think that this specific brand of online information is actually somewhat harmful, because social media is entirely founded upon people convincing themselves that their thoughts are important enough to be heard. So when you put the epitome of self-centeredness in charge of educating people, that means that their information will be tainted at least slightly with the desire to be noticed. And not just in the sense of spreading awareness, but in such a way that will make the poster look good. The creator of this thread or infographic or whatever else cares so much about this topic, and that means that they must deserve positive attention. And in a similar vein, this person spends so much time writing about the best ways to help marginalized communities, and you can't even take the time out of your day to share it? Do you not care about these issues? Who cares if retweeting the documentation of absolutely despicable actions would only spread more misery to your timeline? Who cares if you're actually a member of that marginalized community, as someone who absolutely does not want to see their people get horribly discriminated against, let alone show that to other people? If you're not sharing this, then you are implicit in everything that is harming you or those who you care about. /S. Although Noelle's thread is definitely not the worst example of something like this happening, the concept of it is still baffling. And when you look at Noelle defend her thread, taking no possible criticism, and being insistent that they know what they're talking about because she has most of these mental illnesses, and they have been studying them for 15 years, while simultaneously placing all possible blame on the fact that she is mentally ill, and never considering that they may be capable of making mistakes, you conclude that there's no way this could be real, right? So then that means that this thread must be a vehicle for satire, exposing the issues with this online genre of information. But even if it is satire, it's not good. And while people with disorders mentioned in the thread can definitely derive enjoyment from how not good it is, laughing at the sheer wrongness of some of the definitions, it's still indulging in harmful, unproductive stereotype, with all nuance completely stripped away from the information that is allegedly supposed to be educational. It is funny to look at, but some people online may really perceive mental illness in the way that the thread articulates it, maybe even Noelle if they really aren't bait. And that idea makes the final sentence of the first tweet of the thread all the more concerning. In the first tweet of the thread, Noelle establishes that her intentions are not just to educate people, they also say feel free to self-diagnose based on this thread as well. Although you could dismiss this line as part of the joke, I still feel like this goes a lot deeper. So let's dig. If I can trust you to immediately understand any online concept that I've introduced in this video, I would assume it would be self-diagnosing, but just in case, it is the practice of someone diagnosing themselves with an illness, specifically mental ones for our purposes, instead of going to a professional to get it medically recognized as a thing that they have. Unsurprisingly, there is a decent amount of stigma surrounding the process, with the stereotype being that a teenager will take one do I have depression test and entirely reform the way they present themselves going through life based on the answers they get, but as I specified, that is a stereotype, and it's unfair to assume that everyone who self-diagnoses does it like that, and that's not what I'm trying to make you think. I know that there will always be someone out there who will shout that people are faking illnesses for attention, and while there's technically no way to prove that person wrong, I would like to attempt to convince them, and you, that it's much more nuanced than that, because after all, why would someone purposefully debilitate themselves? Here are my best guesses. One of the biggest defenses of self-diagnosing is that sometimes it's simply the only option people have. Some people may not have the money to go through the professional process, which means that their only choice is doing it all themselves. And some people may not have the means, because most, if not all, of the people who self-diagnose are minors, and maybe their parents don't want them to see a professional, and maybe they're afraid to tell their parents that they suspect they have a mental illness in the first place out of fear for their reaction. And in scenarios like those, I do believe it is entirely justified for people to come to their own conclusions about their mental health, as long as they've done enough actual research and didn't just add neurodivergent to the About Me section of their card after watching one 10 signs you may have ADHD video and nothing more. Bear with me on this other idea, but I think the phenomenon of self-diagnosing may also have something to do with the communities that teenagers surround themselves in online, whether intentionally or not. Communities are formed when lots of people share a common characteristic or interest, and that obviously makes sense. If you would like to talk about Homestuck, then you could go to the webcomics Amino page and find tens of thousands of people who could listen to you. And if you're questioning your identity and you're afraid to have conversations about that with your IRLs, then you could go to r/LGBteens and find over 100,000 people willing to talk you through your journey of self-discovery. And while that's a great resource to have, that idea falls apart when you begin to base communities off of illnesses, once again mental for our purposes. I'm not saying that online support groups are a bad idea, absolutely not, but when a community is formed on the foundation that everyone is suffering in the exact same way, I believe that is one of the most anti-recovery positions that you could place someone in. Normally, when your mental illness warps your way of thinking to the point of becoming worryingly detached from reality, someone can easily diminish the possibility of your thought process being true by reality checking you. And while reality checking people out of nowhere is never an amazing idea, in some communities it is blatantly discouraged in any and all circumstances, which allows those kinds of thoughts to simply reverberate across the community with no one being allowed to stop it, which makes every member of that community slowly dig themselves a deeper and deeper hole, with the possibility of them ever ripping themselves out of it getting smaller and smaller, and the idea of ever getting better becoming more and more of a foreign concept. And this is where I come back to self-diagnosing. I wouldn't say people usually do it for attention, but rather for inclusion, out of a desire to fit in with the communities they find themselves a part of. And when you have, or are convinced that you have, an illness like this, the idea of recovering in any capacity means that you wouldn't fit in anymore, and that terrifies people, which leads them to continue to fall victim to their symptoms. And I believe there's also an implicit effect that can result in a self-diagnosis. When you surround yourself in communities like these for long enough, or even if just all of your friends have the same illness, you will begin to contextualize the way you experience life the same way that everyone else around you does, which makes you start to believe that you must have the same problems everyone else has, which leads you to begin self-diagnosing. Have you noticed that all of this is just so very online? The fact that I can say this many words about just my observations of people my age on Twitter is as astounding as it is depressing. Did you know there's actually a term for that? Terminally online is a relatively new term that people throw around, with it only getting especially popular this year. What's funny about the words terminally online is that you sort of have to be terminally online to understand what they mean. But if you're not and you're confused, here is my best guess at a definition. Terminally online is an adjective used to describe a specific type of discourse or idea that is only ever thought about online and has little to no bearing on the real world, barely influencing anything unless you actively allow it to take up space in your head. It can also be used to describe the type of people who engage in this discourse in the first place, and some people say chronically online instead, but it means the same thing. One time I saw someone call terminally online the newest evolution of terms like SJW or snowflake, and I'm not sure how popular of an opinion that is, but I'll act like it's popular so that disagreeing with it means something. I do think you could possibly argue that calling someone terminally online is the new equivalent of calling someone woke, though. This term seemed to grow popular as a result of some people's desire to call things out as problematic, going back to when I said earlier that some people aren't entirely just interested in educating people when they post informational things to an audience. They also want to look good and be praised for informing. If someone can call out a form of oppression present in everyday society that no one else has thought of yet, then that person will be credited as the one who originally brought up the idea and began a possibly interesting and productive conversation about it. So they take the different forms of oppression, racism, sexism, ableism, classism, homophobia, etc., and attempt to place an action that people do into one of those categories with mixed results. If the majority of people consider them correct, then people will comment, wait, this is kind of valid and based though, but if the majority of people don't see the issue, then that's when the poster is called termly online, along with anyone who agrees with them. One of my favorite examples of a termly online take was this one TikTok I saw a few months ago. It was a video recorded by someone in a wheelchair, and they were saying that able-bodied people who use the elevator in a building to go to, say, the 3rd floor when they could have easily just taken the stairs are ableist. Now, this person was flamed quite a lot, and of course called termly online, but I really don't think it's that simple. So we know the base question. Is using an elevator to go up an amount of floors that you could have easily gone up by taking the stairs ableist? What if you could see that someone using a wheelchair was in the line for the elevator, and you took up enough space to the point where their wheelchair couldn't fit? You're technically still doing the same exact thing. Is it now ableist? Is everyone who responded to that TikTok by clowning on the poster, saying that they would use the elevator anyways, ableist? I mean, hey, they're explicitly saying that they would consciously make the choice to discriminate against a disabled person. That doesn't sound great. I can't answer any of the questions that I'm asking. I am able-bodied, and the only people who should be deciding whether or not something would be discriminatory are the people who would hypothetically be discriminated against. All that I can do is poise these hypotheticals because this really is so interesting to me. And now, apologies for the abrupt transition, but I would like to talk to you about delusional attachments. You may remember me casually mentioning them when I was looking through Noelle's card, and although I did dedicate a sentence to explaining them, I didn't treat it like the biggest of deals. Let's say, if you were still confused, that you googled what is a delusional attachment. If you did that, the only relevant results you would get would be cards and social media posts. And side note, the main Google result is a card that says that the person who coined the term delusional attachment is a racist ableist who stalked and harassed people and allegedly also faked their race online. Because of course they would be awful. Why would life ever allow us the gift of using something without questioning its ethical undertones? Anyways, if you still aren't entirely sure what a DA is, it is a manifestation of psychosis symptoms that results in someone being unequivocally convinced that they are someone or something that is not the person associated with the body that they inhabit. Even calling it a delusion can be a reality check for some, because that already puts a degree of separation between them and who or what they're attached to. But back to Google, the only results that specifically mention DAs are on the first page, and any websites that have actual research to back them up just refer to delusional disorders in their entirety. I know that using search engine results as evidence for an argument is stupid in any circumstance, but I really think there's a point to be made here. I'm not trying to say that people having delusions that they're someone or something they're not only began when one Tumblr user started liking an anime character a bit too much, but what I am trying to point out is that this specific contextualization of psychosis symptoms is something that literally only exists online and primarily on Twitter and TikTok. And forgive me if saying this is weird, but that's fascinating. I don't even think it's fair to call DAs a purely terminally online concept though, because this does still affect people outside of the internet. It is psychosis, after all. Psychosis, along with every other neurodivergency, doesn't just go away when you turn off your phone. Here's my final question. When someone is called terminally online, what is supposed to happen after that? Is the implication that whoever received the insult is supposed to fix themselves somehow? How would they do that? Is it a matter of simply not having whatever terminally online opinion they had previously? Or is there a more foundational issue with the fact that people seem to be able to adopt these terminally online philosophies so easily? That ended up being 5 questions. Oops. Too bad I can't think of an answer for any of them. Is it terminally online of me to care this much? To know all of these definitions of terms that I could have gone my whole life without knowing and have nothing change at all? Is it annoying of me to continuously ask rhetorical questions? Probably. Sorry. The worst part about terminally online discourse is that it literally does not matter, which makes any engagement with it be perceived as a waste of time. And maybe it is, because realistically every bad opinion or idea will be made fun of for about a week before being forgotten about, and unless the original poster decides to continuously be a nuisance, they won't have any real significance either. Barely anyone engaged with Noelle's thread after a few days had passed, and I'm fully aware that I'm part of only a very tiny group of people who haven't fully let go of it yet. And maybe I'll receive some criticism for reigniting the fire or giving this harmful stereotype encourager attention, but I think it's worth it, because this thread really is a microcosm of the entire online culture surrounding Gen Z's mental health, and a discussion deserves to be had. There is almost an entirely separate online interpretation of mental illness and how it affects people, and that reflects in the informational threads and cards made almost always by someone with a specific illness attempting to educate the public on what that illness is. And while first-hand information is always the best for situations like these, Noelle's thread provides an example of where that can go wrong. I think what really could have angered people about her thread and account as a whole is that it was almost like staring into a funhouse mirror, with the system of threads being created suddenly providing something that you could not just easily retweet. And it displayed someone who wore their mental illnesses like badges, just like many others in the communities who saw the thread, yet someone who did not present themselves as being affected by them in the same way as everyone else. Maybe it was a mockery, but maybe it was just someone who was horribly misguided. And what does that idea say about everyone who responded awfully? And what does that say about me and me making this video? You may have noticed that throughout this video, I rarely gave the specifics of any examples that would really prove the points I was trying to make, and I apologize if that made watching this any less engaging, but I specifically made that choice because doing otherwise would require me to call out people who absolutely do not deserve any harm thrown their way. Every person who has done or is doing something that I've talked about here is a product of their mediocre environment, and unless they're doing anything actively malicious, I cannot fault them for that. If you are someone who I've implicitly referred to here, then I am sorry, and I really do hope you can grow as a person. I'm sure you're aware of the issues that plague your daily life, but being aware of your issues and making jokes about the fact that you have them is not the same thing as actively working to fix them. But I trust that with time, you will learn the best methods of ripping yourself out of the hole you've accidentally dug, and that things will get better for you, because you deserve that, and I know you're capable of doing the work necessary to make that happen. As for everyone else, I have one true final question. Would you be interested in some catharsis? First off, I would like to thank my friend, quote, IRL, unquote, as a terminally online person would say, Lee, for allowing me to burn a physical printed out copy of a Twitter thread in their bonfire. I would also like to thank this list of people for lending me their voices and reading out a part of the Twitter thread. I thought it would be funny to get people who were all different flavors of mentally ill and neurodivergent, and they would all read their respective tweet in the thread. Like someone with depression would read the tweet about depression, someone with ADHD would read the tweet about ADHD, etc. One of my worries for this video is that it's going to come across as if I was like putting all of these mentally ill, neurodivergent people on some sort of anti-pedestal, you know, like shining an evil spotlight on them and being like, haha, let's all laugh at them because they're weird. Like, I really don't want this to seem like I think that I'm from the outside looking in, because I'm absolutely not. I am completely in the inside here, and I'm also scared that the way I presented my thoughts and ideas is just not good. Because this video, I feel like, out of any video that I've made ever, is the most, like, purely conceptual. which I also know that means that there's not going to be much supporting visuals, so apologies if this was like visually boring. Hopefully I've added enough like zooms or something to keep it interesting. Though if you did like this video, please tell me, because I have a few other ideas for peeks into the terminally online life. Maybe I could make that a playlist, like the Terminally Online Saga or something. That sounds funny. Once again, I really hope that you liked the video, and I hope that you like the video. Comment if you want, please subscribe, and also, please share. I do not know how the algorithm works at all. I think it hates me. Really, the only way that my videos get shown to new people are by people who like my video showing it to others who they think will like it. So if you like this and you want to see me grow, please do that. Maybe we can reach 500 subscribers by the end of the year. That sounds nice. Also, look at all of this new fan art I have, however much is new since the previous after show. If you want to draw me, please do that, and then send it to me, and I will print it out here. Thank you so much. Please take care of yourselves, and please don't be terrible people. Hopefully those are good ending lines. Bye.